Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to Link Up Leaders, your direct link to leaders in supply chain and e-commerce. My name is Lisa Kinski. I'm your producer and co-host, and joined as always by Francois Jeffrey. Francois, how are you doing today?
I am fantastic. A little cold. I was telling you and Jack over there. So we cranked up the heat a little bit, which I'm very happy about. But doing great other than that. How are you?
I've had a rough week, if being honest. Yeah. So I'm fighting
Yeah, with the fridge and everything.
the
Well, at
fridge,
least,
the
with
dentist.
everything going on, even, you look great. Your hair
Thank
looks
you.
great too. I
Thank
meant to
you.
comment on that earlier. Yeah,
I
and for anyone that's
appreciate it.
listening, it is a new hairdo.
I curled it for once. And ended up being a little bit late to a call this morning because I convinced myself that it was on Friday, and I told you the call was on Friday,
You
and
did.
it wasn't. It was today. But yes, Jack said I looked like fall. I have the curled hair, the big puffy sweater, I have little booties on, and then I even have a warm and thankful heart mug on drinking out of with me. It's part of the outfit. So yeah, trying to manifest some good positives going on, because this week has
Okay.
kind of been trash. But I might be fridgeless for Lord knows how long because of supply chain.
Yes.
I might be buying a mini fridge. I might be living out of a cooler. I might.
Well, it's crazy supply chain right now, especially with
Yeah.
appliances. I remember when we were working on that project up in Pitt, um, they were trying to get a lot of appliances from like Lowe's and Home Depot, and a lot of this stuff was back ordered by like 4 or 5 months, where they were used to
Don't
maybe
say
like a few
that.
week delay, like 4 or 5 months, which is absolutely insane. Now I imagine they could replace any fridge for you, but they were trying to replace like 50 units that were the same fridges and everything as the ones that they bought previously for the other apartments.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's absolutely nuts. I think anyone, particularly in the e-commerce space, we're in November right now, they're going to be feeling it a lot more. And I think us as consumers, it's going to be tough with holiday season coming up. And then also noting the delays from Chinese New Year that are going to be coming up in January, February,
Yeah.
and the price surges, which is another completely different topic. Hopefully we could find someone to actually talk about this. But when I was looking at like the rates of inflation and everyone putting out graphics for inflation, it makes sense. But I don't think that they're accounting for also all of the issues in supply chain that are driving up these consumer prices. So it's something where it's like, yes, inflation plays a big role in it, but how much just does the screw ups in supply chain today actually play a role in these consumer packaged goods going up, and that's across the board, right? We're talking about delays in trucking, in
Yeah.
warehousing and cold storage. Warehousing is becoming extremely scarce nowadays, so I imagine cold storage is also. So the cost of all of our produce and goods are going to go up.
Oh yeah.
We'll see how this goes,
Well,
especially next
even
year.
even I mean, Jack just ordered a hat. He said from Texas or somewhere, a Braves World Series hat, and he's like, "How long does it take to ship a hat?" I'm like, "Jack, you work in supply chain. You know how long it takes." He's like, "Yeah, but it's in the U.S." I'm like, "Truckers, honey, we don't have any of them." And he's like, "Well, it should still be here
Yeah.
sooner." I'm like, "Just go drive to get it then." I don't know what to tell you. It's gonna take a long time. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important for a lot of business owners, especially to keep up to date with a lot of these supply chain issues, domestically and foreign. And it's looking at, for example, the statistics and drivers and how they're going to be dropping off over the next few years. Because I think it was like 50% of the workforce over the next 5 to 10 years are planned to drop off. This was a U.S. Census, planned to drop off because of age, and they don't have enough to replace them. So it's like, what are we going to
Oh,
do
you're
about
talking
this?
about the
And
size of each of the generations because of the baby boomers, and there's less within millennials and Gen X. Well, what they've actually done, and this is so not on topic. Honestly, we just need to have an episode where you and I just shoot the shit, because that's what a whole episode could be. My dad was telling me about this because he used to be a truck driver, and they've actually lowered the minimum age requirement for your CDL to 18 to try to encourage more drivers. So like to try to fill that gap. Now that leads into a whole nother conversation about everybody getting benefits and not really wanting to work right now. So we're gonna skip over that.
I think what this also plays into, though, and with his great book, he touches on this in a few parts of it, but is how supply chain impacts the valuation of businesses. And maybe we could chat with him a little bit about that.
Yes.
Because we have a great guest that has an amazing book that we could definitely talk about for an entire hour.
For a whole hour. Well, 55 minutes. Everybody, today we have with us Joe Valley. He is the author of the EXITpreneur's Playbook. I have here my signed copy. So Joe, thank you for joining us today. It's awesome to speak with you. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Good to be here. Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I love that you have the full professional mic setup. You've done a bunch of these, haven't you? I saw like a couple of episodes linked on your site, and you're kind of everywhere.
I've done a few. Yeah. I had a breakdown a few weeks ago and took 2 weeks off because it can be awesome and exhausting all at the same time. But yeah, I love talking about what I do and helping people understand it, because it's really damn confusing, to be honest with you.
Is it confusing, or is it just that there's so many people out there doing it wrong, yelling louder than other people?
Well, all that makes it confusing, right? You talk to the guy that says he sold for 6 times, and you're like, okay, awesome. I deserve 6 times. Well, first the question is 6 times of what? And then we can go deep into the weeds. And there's just so much misinformation out there coming out of people's mouths and in blogs and content. And then when you want to learn it all, if you're like, I'm going to read everything, it's not all in one place, or never was all in one place. And even though I wrote the book and it's theoretically all in one place, things change. Valuations have gone up, since I wrote the book. So it's not set in stone. Things change. So you got to learn as much as you can, get trained as much as you can about your business, because it's probably your most valuable asset. And then when we have these massive supply chain issues that we're having now, and the year before that, COVID, and then tariffs before that, right? They're all financial and emotional challenges for entrepreneurs that put us sort of, at the end of our wick, if you will, burning the candle at both ends. And we wake up and go like, I got to get out. What do I do? How do I get out? Please, somebody buy this. And that's not the best approach, right? So, I'm trying to help people understand what they have first, and sort of get some training and I hate the word planning, but plan to sell their business instead of waking up like I did back in 2010 and decide to sell my business. So I'm trying to help them out.
You make it a point. You make it a point in your book to actually change that word, because I think it does have sort of this negative connotation for visionaries and entrepreneurs or exitpreneurs, that planning is very daunting. Whereas training, you could get behind training. And you have a few examples, I think, in there about there was a quote, but it was like working out in the gym, and it's like, let's get through the toughest time right now.
Choose your pain.
Choose your pain.
Yeah.
That was a quote.
Yeah. People that wake up and decide to sell don't want to do it. They choose the wrong kind of pain. It's financial pain. It's emotional pain. They're not able to hang up their cleats at the end of the day and do whatever the hell they want, because they didn't earn enough money in their exit. Or enough money in their exit to take some time off and then go on that next entrepreneurial adventure, right? So they're choosing the wrong pain. If they get some training, which is what I was doing while I was, working out that day, and that trainer yelled, "Choose your pain, Valley." Of course, she didn't, because it was a Beachbody program, but I'm pretty sure she said that. You get training all along the way. So, I try to use that as much as possible, and try to use the word training as much as possible, but sometimes it can be confusing for people. So I mix in, it's funny. I never wanted to use the word exit or planning in any of it, but I really cannot get away from it. The title of the book is EXITpreneur, which thank you very much, Francois, for pronouncing it properly. I created a new word that is hard to pronounce for many people, and many people that are my friends and associates that have mastermind groups. And like, I was at one a few weeks ago, and I'm not going to name names, but he stood up and held up the book and gave out a copy to everybody, and sort of stumbled across the word EXITpreneur. But maybe it's because he
rolls off the tongue.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're gonna try to make it a staple in entrepreneurial language that, they want to be exitpreneurs and they're working on exitpreneurship, exitpreneurism, whatever twist and tangle, because that's ultimately where, at least 50% of all of the money we ever make from being an entrepreneur, and I'm an entrepreneur, have been since 1997, at least 50% of all the money you'll ever make as an entrepreneur does come the day that you exit your business. So it's really good to figure out how to be the best exitpreneur that you can be.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go back into your background. You said that you've been an entrepreneur since 97. Tell us a little bit about how you got to even writing this book. I mean, clearly you've had some exits. You are an exitpreneur. Walk us through that.
Yeah. Self-employed since 97. I left my last job in 97. I was getting paid $35,000 a year. And that's because there was a pay cut because of company, downsizing. I was making 50. And this is a company where I was employee number 34, I believe. And had 3 amazing years there. I started in January of 94. I left in spring of 97. And we went from 34 employees to well over 1,000, from 17 million in revenue to 102 million in revenue. When the company did 34 million in revenue, the owner, Rob, made $5 million. When we did $102 million in revenue, he lost $3 million. So I learned a little bit about growing the wrong way there, but it became a point where it got to be too big, and I am an entrepreneur. And I was becoming a worker bee, going into the office every day. So as I mentioned in the book, I resigned before I got fired, because I would have gotten fired. I was very vocal about certain people being promoted to their level of incompetence. And when they're your boss, that doesn't really go over very well.
Yeah.
So I resigned, took a little vacation, and came back and said, I'm out of here. They actually exited me to the door, walked me to the door, which is interesting. But I started a media buying agency, which was the plan all along. I told my wife and friends and family that if I could save $10,000, I'm going to just start my own business. And that's what I did. I had $10,000. I lived in a 2-family. The rent from the front paid for the mortgage. So I was living debt free, which I would advise to every entrepreneur or every entrepreneur in the making: keep your overhead low, because that got me started. I made 10 times the amount of money that I thought I was going to make in that first entrepreneurial year. My goal was 50,000, and I earned 500,000. And I thought, this is pretty damn good. I'm going to stick with this for a while. And I grew that business from a single person media buying agency, buying radio direct response ad for clients that eventually, went to TV and internet, to a staff ultimately of about 16 or 17 folks when we include some customer service folks. I launched my first product in January of 98. I did radio, I did TV. I was a co-host on a TV infomercial. Second one after that, we did radio, we did TV. I knew on that second one that I lost about $100,000 in a day after I saw the production of it. We had the female Doogie Howser that was also a talk show host, and an ex-CNN anchor come to co-host the infomercial, and they just clearly didn't like each other, and it was awful. So I lost about $100,000 on that, which is, I talk about the epic successes and failures that I have had in the last 24 years as an entrepreneur. But I that last business, I took 100% online in 2005, and then went through the best of and the worst of the economy, and came out the other end in 2010, exhausted, tired, emotionally worn down, for a business that was giving me a pretty good life. I was living on a lake here in North Carolina. I was working 20, 25 hours a week. My wife was taking care of the kids. I'd be able to look out of my office and see her and all the kids and friends playing in the pool. And I was miserable work-wise. So I decided to sell that day. I had a conversation with 3 different brokerage firms. 2 were just trying to get their hooks into me for commission. The third was a guy named Mark Dowse from a company called Quiet Light Brokerage. We had an initial conversation, and then he actually reviewed my P&Ls. He said, Joe, you need to wait 6 months. You will make so much more money if you wait, because, the numbers are coming back. I'm like, who the hell are you telling me to go away thinking in my best interest? Right. I was sold hook, line, and sinker. So I came back in 6 months, sold through Quiet Light, took a year off, and then joined the team in early 2012. Since then, I've sold about 100 million personally. The team, I've helped facilitate another $500 million. When I joined in 2012, we had 4 of us: Mark, myself, Jason, and Amanda. Mm-hmm. Now we've got about 35 altogether, a total of 17 advisors now and support staff. We'll close about $250 million in transactions this year, and I'm pretty sure that's going to double next year based upon some of the things in the pipeline. It's as you know, a rapidly growing industry, the e-commerce. All we do is work as M&A advisors for online businesses anywhere. I used to say in the sub $25 million range, but every time I give a number, we sort of break that ceiling. Mm-hmm. We got somebody working on a $300 million transaction right now. So it's kind of stunning. So the frustration, I'll tell you, I say in the book, and interrupt me often because I will ramble if you let me. I did the math. I've had over 8,000 one-on-one conversations with entrepreneurs thinking about exiting their businesses. Mm-hmm. And I found myself not able to share enough information because A, they're reluctant to talk to an advisor. B, they can't absorb it all. Mm-hmm. And the material is still sort of scattered, even though it's me talking and presenting materials and doing a deep dive of their P&L. And so I just had to, for self-preservation, so I don't have another 8,000 one-on-one conversations over the next 9 years, I had to put it all in writing. And the book is a culmination of all of that, and really will help entrepreneurs that read it. And I could tell you a story about that. I had a call recently, people that actually, use it as a tool to help them understand the value of their business and grow it, and, pull the different levers that will make sure it gets maximum value. It's going to help them navigate that whole process. And it's kind of like a reference guide. Mm-hmm. It's very readable. It's like I'm sitting down having a beer with them at a pub, but it can be something that they can refer back to throughout their entrepreneurial journey as they're planning their own eventual exit.
Yeah, I would agree, because we were just able to skim through it this morning. Sorry, this week's been crazy. And when we had our call just last week, I was like, I'll read it before our episode. I'm a very slow reader. I didn't think that we were going to have this episode so quickly. But even just skimming through it, it's not written like a textbook. It's written like a conversation. So it's super easily digestible. What's your story of if they actually read it? What is that?
I got a call from someone, from a podcaster, somebody that I was a guest on their podcast, and he's an entrepreneur. And I said, listen, call me. You need any help? He was trying to sell his business. He was doing it on his own. Just pick my brain. I'm here. I'm happy to help. And so he sends me the letter of intent, and we go down through it. And he also sent me his P&L that he prepared for the people that were buying his business. And it was a direct sale to an aggregator of FBA businesses, but this person didn't have any commerce FBA business. That's all I dare to say. And I asked him, I said, well, what kind of, ad backs did you do? Did you do this? Did you do that? Did you do that? He's like, no, I didn't. I'm like, did you read my book? Did you look at chapter 11? Like, come on, what's wrong with you? He was giving away like $150,000 in what I call an ignorance discount to this aggregator because he didn't do a proper ad back schedule. Mm-hmm. So yes, you got to actually read the book in order to gain some knowledge from it and some experience from it. And it's not just written for the person doing 50,000 in revenue or 500,000 in revenue or 50 million in revenue. It's really written for everybody. I was at an event 3 weeks ago and sitting around a fire pit at the end of the day, talking to somebody that, does many numbers into the 8 figures, to the point where he gets $50,000 a month in cash back money. $50,000 a month. That's $600,000 a year that just slides over to his personal account. They do something called credit card stacking. He didn't realize that cash back was an ad back. And so his business is huge. Let's just say it's worth 10 times. that adds $6 million onto the list price of his business. He bought me a beer after we were chatting for a while.
I hope so.
So I think that's the most money I've ever added to somebody's business inside of 30 minutes. And I got a cold beer for it as well. So it's, even though he's doing, $45 million in revenue, it doesn't mean he knows everything. There's still some things that he's an expert at that. He's not an expert at the stuff that I am an expert at.
Mm-hmm. He should have bought you a boat.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. Even a piece in your book, when you're talking about experts now, it's important to also hire experts for bookkeeping within your specific industry, right? Mm-hmm. Hiring an expert in e-commerce bookkeeping is much different than hiring an accountant that typically handles brick and mortar, for example, because they know a lot, at least I would hope so, but they tend to stay more up to date with some of these things, like the ad backs that you could have. And like you said, 150,000, if we talk about a 5-6 times exit, maybe $25,000 in ad back by itself, it might not seem like a tremendous amount because you have, minor spending here, minor spending there, but it adds up, right? Yeah. And with these multiples, it's crazy. And it all ties into the equations that you have.
It does. And if, you start to think, well, it doesn't add up, you just got to do the math and think about, okay, my son goes to NC State. It's $25,000 a year. For every $25,000 that's discovered in the P&L, if my business is selling for a 4-time multiple, that just paid for 4 years of college. And put tangible things to it, even if it's a vacation that you and your family are going to take. Those little things will pay for things if you pay attention to the details. And as far as the experts and hiring them, I'm a huge advocate of not having your CPA do your bookkeeping, because their job is tax mitigation and tax planning and preparation. It's not, properly setting up a profit and loss statement, balance sheet, and all that in accrual for an e-commerce business. That e-commerce bookkeeper can also help with cash flow projections, which is kind of critical in this supply chain fiasco that we're in now, right? People are not getting their products in time. Therefore, they're not getting the money from sales, but they've got to pay that bill because it's landed somewhere or close to it. And they're not able to keep up financially. So they have to go into growth fund experts, growth capital experts to get funding for more inventory because they don't have it in the bank account anymore. Maybe because they didn't have a proper e-commerce bookkeeper that helped them with cash flow projections. It's all tied together.
Mm-hmm. And for anyone, this is self-serving because I also don't know. Can you talk a little bit more about accrual? Because I don't think that's necessarily, I know you talk about, I believe it's cash flow versus accrual?
Well, it's cash accounting. Look,
cash accounting.
For the record, crystal clear, I fell asleep in accounting class in college.
Okay.
Oh my God, I did too. I got C's in both of them.
Oh. Did you drool on the desk and the entire class left and then the whole new class came in?
Ooh,
I got you covered. And I went to Northeastern and so there's like 200 kids in the classroom, big stadium. And I was snoring on the desk and everybody left and the new class comes in. I'm like, oh shit. Yeah. So I don't love accounting, but you have to understand certain things. So cash accounting is that, if you buy $50,000 worth of inventory in the month of April, then your profit that month is going to be $50,000 less, right? Because you're putting it there. As you spend the cash, you're putting it there. So that's a problem, right? Because that inventory is on the P&L instead of on your balance sheet. Your P&L should show that you've got $50,000 more in net profit. If you do accrual accounting, every time you sell that widget one at a time, it totals up to the total amount of widgets sold for the month times the $2 cost. And it's an exact amount. I sold 1,000 widgets. They cost $2,000. My cost of goods sold for inventory that month is $2,000 instead of the $50,000.
Okay,
that makes sense.
A lot of see, it gets into the weeds. What it does, if anybody out there watching, listening is trying to buy an online business, you want to hope and pray that the person selling the business to you, if they've got an e-commerce business that's growing rapidly, that they're doing cash accounting, because that's going to depress the profit, depress the seller's discretionary earnings, which is what the multiple is applied to. And so they're going to be selling their business for a lot less. See if I do this math simple. So let's just say you've got $100,000 worth of inventory on hand.
Okay.
You've paid for that. In cash accounting, it's on the books already. So you're $100,000 less profitable. Makes sense so far?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So instead of $200,000 net income, you've only got $100,000 net income. When you sell your business for a 4-time multiple, that's worth $400,000.
Mm-hmm.
With accrual accounting, the bottom line number is actually $200,000, because your cost of goods sold is in there per widget. You didn't sell $200,000 worth of inventory. It's $2,000. So $200,000 to the bottom line times 4 is $800,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's the way to do it. It's the proper way to do it. We will not list a business for sale with cash accounting. We will do our best to help the entrepreneur. If they don't have an e-commerce bookkeeper, flip it to accrual. But even then, you got to be careful, because you don't want to overinflate cost of goods sold, because it's going to depress your profit, or underinflate it because you're going to leave money on the table. So you need a good e-commerce bookkeeper. We can go on for another hour on that if you want to, but I don't think it's going to be that exciting.
Well, you brought, oh, sorry. You
You're-
brought up one thing earlier, and that was the reluctance to talk to advisors.
Mhm.
And we were just at an Amazon powwow and in Miami last week. And this topic, I think, was coming up more in conversation, and even through some of the speakers than not. And it was, some people want to go direct. Some people obviously want to use an advisor, which makes sense, right? You have an example of, selling your home, which is the largest asset that you have typically in your lifetime. And when you sell that, you typically talk to a real estate agent to help you sell that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where did this, or I guess, why do so many entrepreneurs have this reluctance to talk to advisors for their exits?
Unfortunately, 2 reasons, and both are, I don't know, part of the human condition. So the first reason is because not all advisors are entrepreneurs turned advisors, like the team at Quilite. They're hired as salespeople and brokers, and they have a certain stigma about them that, if you called me, Francois, I would help you like Mark helped me. I would give you the best advice for you, not for me and my company. Best advice for you. And ultimately, you're going to choose me, probably, because I did that, even if it takes another 12 months to help you achieve your financial goals. At the end of the day, that's actually better for me too, because your business is bigger and I benefit more. Whereas the typical salesperson type broker that's not an entrepreneur who's been there, done that, they're just trying to talk you into sign an engagement letter, like I had in my experience, where I felt them try to reach through the hooks. So that's one of the problems and conditions, right? People are not comfortable talking to them because they don't see the value, number one, and because of the experience that they may have had or heard of that's negative. The second problem is that, the aggregators are saying, we'll pay you all cash, close in 30 days, and avoid the broker fees. And it's a hell of a sales pitch. And as I say in the book, chapter 13 is about aggregators. I like them. I think they've done an amazing job bringing to the forefront what Quilite hasn't done in 14 years. It was founded in 2007. It's 15 years now. We were trying to get across the message. You can actually sell an online business. In 2016, I wrote a book called, a little tiny booklet, I'll call it now, 10 Steps to Selling Your Amazon Business. Nobody really was doing it then and didn't think they could, but they could. I had documents from Amazon in it to show that you could. Well, lo and behold, 5 years later, everybody's doing it. Thras, Boosted, Perch, Elevate, they've all done an amazing job of elevating people's consciousness to know that they can sell an FBA business in this specific niche. The problem is that their sales pitch is a sales pitch that should make you go, oh, wow, that seems too good to be true. And it is too good to be true. I like them, though. I respect them. I think they've done a great job. But if you are going in to pitch your product on Shark Tank and you're all excited, you prepare for it and you're ready to go, pitch your product, you walk into the tank and everybody calls in sick except for Mr. Wonderful, you're not going to get a great deal. You need all the sharks there, and then you need, them times 10, I think, to get the absolute best deal. Right? So that's actually like the 5th step in 5 steps to getting maximum value, and that's creating competition. But understanding a proper add back schedule, like the gentleman I talked about at the fire pit that bought me a beer, if he sold direct to an aggregator because he believed the pitch, get all cash close in 30 days and avoid the broker fee, he would have lost $6 million. Right? And that's not all, because there were other add backs that he had no idea of. There's a tremendous value in having an advisor on your side, but I wrote the book because I know not everybody's going to choose to go that route. And this will give you the tools and resources to at least fend for yourself a little bit better when you're putting together your P&L and an add back schedule. Simple example, and this one's not in the book. This one came up when I was on a live LinkedIn show like this with an aggregator. Okay. All of the aggregators subscribe to Jungle Scout and Helium 10. They probably pay, let's just call it at least $500 a month, maybe $1,000. They probably got elevated services and so on and so forth. But the business owners that we all know that run FBA businesses, everybody that was at that event in Florida, they all subscribe to one or other or both. And let's just say they spend $500 a month. If they're selling only to an aggregator, is that an expense that carries forward to the new owner of the business? $500 a month?
They just take off because they already pay for it.
They already have it. That's $6,000 a year. They sell their business for 3-time multiple. That's $18,000 a year. That's 3/4 of the way for paying for that first year of education. And that's just one little thing. They can still sell directly to the aggregator, but they've got to learn those types of nuances to make sure they're getting maximum value. It's not gray add backs. If they're only selling to an aggregator, it's black and white math and logic. You have to have the math and logic in there. You can't say, well, I did an advertising campaign and it failed, so I'm going to go ahead and do an add back for that $17,000. Well, that's a load of bull, because everybody that owns the business in the future is going to have failed advertising campaigns as well. That's not an expense that will never carry forward. That's part of being an entrepreneur. You guys do it, I do it as well. So you got to use math and logic and be completely black and white with it. And there's dozens of those, examples.
Well, and I'm glad that you brought up the aggregators, because that's what I wanted to bring up. Was you do have a chapter in the book about it, and you had said before, like, they didn't used to be as prevalent as they are now. And I think sometimes because there are so many of them and they're getting so big and their pitches do sound so great. And obviously, there's these conferences and e-commerce business owners, they talk, right? So if somebody sells their business to an aggregator, they're going to tell their friend how quickly they made their money. But I think that there's so many new sellers that don't even know that there's another way to sell their business, and that they should be kind of arming themselves with this information.
I think if I spoke to everyone that sold to an aggregator, I would venture to guess that at least 90% of them left so much money on the table that it would have more than paid for an advisor fee. They also would have had a more stable emotional process, a more stable due diligence process, and gotten to choose their aggregator instead of the aggregator choosing them, because you just get more competition. We've had an average, and this by the way is not a pitch for Quiet Light. I don't know, take me off this track when I get to it, but we've had an average of 4.5 offers on every listing year to date. That means that our clients get to choose their buyer. And that's really, really important, because you have to get along with them through due diligence and then during the training and transition period, even the aggregators. Most of the aggregators are still going to ask for some sort of stability payment. So I pay all cash at closing, and part of my offer is that some of that cash is going to remain in escrow for 12 months. And as long as you've hit 90% of total revenues, that 10% of the purchase price or $200,000 will get released. It's all tricky. Again, they're really great people. They're very likable. I like them. I want to have beer and take them out to dinner, and that's what makes them dangerous. Okay. I really do like them. In case Carlos is listening, I've got a picture on my phone of Carlos holding my book. Carlos is CEO of Thrive. He's a super likable guy. when Thrust got their first $780 million valuation, we'd sold them 20% of their transactions. They're good buyers. I don't think we've gone through any transaction with them where it fell apart and they didn't do everything they could to close. They're good buyers. They're good people. If you sell directly to them, you've got to do your homework and get training so that you can get maximum value to them if you sell directly to them, which again is fine. There's plenty of business to go around. If somebody wants to take those reins and do it on their own, I wrote the book for it. So buy the book, please. I'm not making any money off of book sales, but you can buy me a beer someday.
It's fairly inexpensive too. Kindle's only like $5-10. I mean, obviously I love paperback books personally, but the Kindle version is just as good as that. If anyone has $5, $10 to spare, that can potentially get them back millions of dollars, like you had, that conversation over a campfire.
And if you don't, you've got other problems that I can't really help with.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think a big part of this is also mindset, right? If you choose to sell yourself and you don't read the book, it might very well be, and you talk about this so much in the book too, the fact that you might just be burned out, right? The fact that you just want to get out no matter what. And it's a big sum of money. This is probably the most money a lot of people are ever going to make in their lives, unless they're serial entrepreneurs that continue reinvesting this. But it's all about the planning aspect and the training, I think. And for 333 pages, 340 pages to gain so much knowledge and tools, I think it just opens your eyes to what is out there. What can you do even if you wanted to sell yourself?
Yeah. So, you said something in there about the emotional and grinding it out. And that's what they're doing. They're just on a hamster wheel, grinding it out every day with no real end in mind. Right. So the first step that I advise people to do is to set some goals, and that alone can change their life. I mean, there's been studies on it, but you got to write the goals down and you've got to revisit those goals. So the way I do it is always in dollars, date, and feeling. So, you'll fill something out that might say, I will sell my business in the third quarter of 2024 for $5 million. And when I do, I will feel unburdened because I'll be out of debt, have enough money in the bank to start my next adventure, and spend much more time with my family. It's that third part, I think, that really sets things apart for entrepreneurs, because all of us have had tough days. Lisa, you've had a very tough week, right? Supply chain issues, and you don't have a fridge that you want to have. I totally get it. We all have really tough days, months, and sometimes years as entrepreneurs. When you have written goals down that have dollars, date, and feeling in them, you can always refocus on those things and make shifts in your business and pull the levers to make sure you're on track to those goals. It'll help you get over those hurdles, around those potholes a lot more. And I can say that from personal experience, because I've been doing this for 24 years. And I've had years where I've made, well above 7 figures. Yes, 7 figures. And I've had years when I've thought, oh, I'm so excited that I have a carry forward loss and I don't have to pay any taxes. It's not something that any entrepreneur should be excited about. And you lose $250,000, which I lost in 1 year. But that's life. And if you have your goals written down, that's the first thing you've got to do is do that. And then the next step is reverse engineer a path to them and get that training that I talk about. If you just simply wait for that email, that snail mail, that phone call to come from Boosted, Thrust, Perch, Elevated, Profound Commerce, which is a new one, you're going to be reacting to it and go, oh, wow, that's interesting. That's an interesting number. Wow, they close in 30 days. I'm tired today. I think I'll get out. Right? If they catch you at the right time, you may be in a tough situation. Back in 2010, I could have been in that situation. I got advice, wait, and I made a lot more money because of it. So you got to set those things first and then reverse engineer a path to where you are today, right? So you've got the goal. Now you've got to figure out where you are. Chapter 11 on ad backs will help you dramatically with that. And I can't remember the chapter off the top of my head that's on valuations and valuation ranges. And I think it says, nothing is set in stone because values go up and down. Right now they're going up, which is a good thing. But you've got to set that goal and then figure out where you are today to see how far or how close you are to them, and then chart that path. You can't just put in, I want to go to Boise, Idaho, in Google Maps, and Google Maps doesn't know where you are, right? It's going to be real hard to get there. So you need that path. You need to know where you are today to get where you're going. Those are the first two things that I think people have to do, and they can do that without speaking to an advisor. They get pretty close on that valuation range.
Well, I mean, I think we're talking a lot about the middle components and even the beginning, and we talked about the end of these steps that we were here to talk about
Yes.
initially in selling an online business.
Well, I can go on a
I,
tangent, so keep bringing me back on track.
yeah, no, I think it's important to talk about a lot of these real life scenarios because I'm sure there are Amazon sellers, there are business owners, online retailer, business owners, whatever you want to call them, that are struggling right now, and they just they might need a moment of relief of just like, okay, I'm not in this alone. There are others out there that are struggling, that are hustling every single day, and I do plan to sell it, but I never thought about planning to sell it, or I never
Mhm.
planned at the beginning to sell it. I just built up an amazing brand, and I didn't know where it was going.
Mhm.
So I think it's important to have these conversations too. But I definitely want to touch back on these 5 steps.
Yes.
Yeah, and just sort of walking through them. I'm sure this is also going to lead to a lot of tangents. But where does a business start? I guess when they plan to sell their online business.
With the goals, right? You
Mm,
got to
Okay.
figure out, okay, I'm planning, I'm deciding, I'm training to sell my business. How much do I want to sell it for? When do I want to sell it? Okay, how close or how far I am to that. So step one, set those goals, dollars, date, and feelings. Step two, where the hell am I now? Reverse engineer a path to that goal. Right. And I learned this from somebody that is working on his own $100 million exit. Reverse engineer a path to that goal. And I've done that for you. He had to do it on his own because it's a much bigger company. Actually, he was going for $1 billion exit when he was doing this initially. And there's not a whole lot of information out there except for publicly traded companies, and he's private. So you got to figure out where you are today, and that's that math logic chapter 11, different chapters within the book, the valuation chapters and the add back chapters, so you can properly calculate sellers' discretionary earnings. And part of that is training as well, right? So when someone says, "Yeah, I sold my business for 5 times," I would ask everybody to say, "Cool, 5 times what?
mm,
Was your inventory included in that purchase price? Did your buyer require any working capital? Was that deducted off of the purchase price in due diligence because you left that vague thing in there? Because private equity companies do that, and then they chuckle in the background. We're going to renegotiate this big time because, yeah, we need 6 months of working capital, which means all of the overhead for the business needs to be transferred, or it's not transferred with the sale. It's actually deducted off the purchase price. All of these
Mhm.
little nuances, and that's part of getting training, but you got to figure out where you are today. So step one, set some goals, dollars, date, feeling. Step two, where the hell are you today? Calculate your seller's discretionary earnings and understand valuation ranges. And now you know your path. Now what I want you to do in step three is actually shift your mindset a little bit from entrepreneur to exitpreneur.
Mhm.
And when you become an exitpreneur, you're actually thinking not just about how much money you're going to make, because that is not going to be the best approach to making the most money, believe it or not. What you really want to do is build a great business for a great buyer to take over at a great price. When you do all of those things, you're going to wind up in a situation where you will have multiple offers that are at or over asking price with great deal structures that you can live with. Hopefully all cash. At the very least, the larger the business gets, the more seller notes and earnouts and things of that nature get in there. But shifting your mindset to building a great business for that great buyer is really, really critical. Tangent on this one. So I sold an affiliate platform years ago for this couple of guys, couple of entrepreneurs, and they had gone to investment bankers and got some pie in the sky dreams, and they were really shooting for the moon, which reaching for the stars, I guess, is a better way to go, which I can appreciate. The challenge with it is they came up way short, and they came to me beaten down, emotionally dejected, and just needing to get out. And it was a business, because they were so emotionally beaten down, it was trending down, which means it's harder to get out. The valuation goes down pretty quickly. But we did it. We got them out, and they had enough money to take some time off, think about what they're going to do, and build their next adventure, which they did. And they came to me a couple of summers ago and gave me this scenario with a problem that they had. They had a business with a lot of recurring revenue, monthly subscription type of business. And they had a huge problem with chargebacks. And he explains to me, well, this is what we're going to do to solve the problem with chargebacks. We're going to use one merchant provider for up to X dollars, and then we're going to flip to the second one up to X dollars. That way, our total chargebacks are not going to go over a certain percentage, and we're going to be okay. And it was basically a business being built on a house of cards. You were trying to trick the system to solve a problem instead of actually solving the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a tough conversation with him, and I said, look, why don't you just address the problem? He's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, why are you getting the chargebacks? Because your customers don't know that you're going to charge them every month for the service that you're providing.
Mm-hmm.
It's hidden in the terms. Come up front, reach out to them in advance, send an email, whatever you got to do, and say, you're up for renewal next month, and blah, blah, blah. He goes, well, that will reduce sales. I'm like, yes, but at least you'll have a sellable business. With this house of cards you're building, you're not going to get the value that this type of business deserves if you do things right. Build a great business for a great buyer to take over at a great price. I thought I'd lost him forever because he wanted to just build this and get out.
Mm-hmm.
He's a smart guy because he listened to me, of course, right? And I just reach over, pat myself on the back. He came back maybe a year later, and his business was just screaming with growth. And the chargeback problem went away, and he was reaching out to the customers and thinking about them first and taking care of them. And more of them were telling other people in the same niche, and growth was explosive. We sold the business for so much more than it would have been worth if he had done it the other way. He ended up getting so much that I think he probably never needs to work again for the rest of his life, but he's a young guy and he will. But he switched it from building a business on a house of cards that might not have been sellable to maybe sellable with awful deal terms, right? So somebody's going to buy that. They're going to see that risk. They have to then go out and get all of these merchant accounts and play that same game. You don't get away with that game for long. You get caught. So anybody that would have bought it would have paid a very low multiple and required an earnout. Instead, he got a very high multiple and he got paid all cash for a very, very big business because it's a great business and a great niche, taking care of great customers. So he shifted his mindset to taking care of the business first and building it for a great buyer to take over at a great price. So he got all three. He nailed it with all three of the things to do in step number 3, which is shifting your mindset.
And I forgot where I heard this, but it might have actually been Chris Shipfilling from Global Wired, where he was saying, you want to build it to where you as the owner have the least amount of problems that you have to deal with, where everything is functioning operationally sound. You don't have to, know, your teams are running, you step in, you check on them instead of constantly creating or having new problems that you as the business owner has to solve, because then the buyer has to think about all those problems too.
Yeah. Which
is going to create that lower multiple.
Exactly. It goes to the transferability of the business. There's 4 pillars that we talk about. It's growth, transferability, documentation. And how is this escaping me? I've said this thing for 10 years. It's in my book. Please open my book and tell me what it is.
I was going to say, I saw it this morning.
Yeah, help me out. Transferability is one of the hugest ones. Okay, this is embarrassing.
I think it was risk. Growth,
transferability, and documentation.
Sometimes I feel like risk is supposed to be under growth, so I get that one lost. Yeah. So risk, growth, transferability, and documentation. It should go without saying, if the assets of the business don't transfer, you do not have a sellable business. But if you are the name and face of the business, or you are in the weeds every single day, 60 hours a week, your business is going to sell for less. You need to replace yourself for at least 20 hours a week with a low priced VA and get out of the weeds and be more of a director or an orchestra director, so that the transferability of the business is much easier, much more successful, and that you're not having to help the new owner of the business for a long time during training and transition. The typical training and transition period literally says in our asset purchase agreements, up to 40 hours over the first 90 days after closing. That's the starting clause. 90% of the time it stays just that. So up to 40 hours over the first 90 days. But if you're working 60 hours a week and you're in the weeds, as Chris says, and you're pulling all of the strings, it's going to take longer. And a buyer's going to see that and ask you to stick around for a longer period of time or work more hours, which is frustrating. You don't want to do that. The documentation is one of those pillars, and that comes to the SOPs, right? You get all the SOPs in place for what you do and your team does every day, and you don't have to answer every email, text, and phone call with a lot of detail. You can answer it with we've covered this. here in this link. Go ahead and check out this SOP for that. Should solve the problem. Let me know if you want to talk it through. So transferability is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any services or tools that you see are consistent for tracking and managing SOPs across e-commerce businesses?
No, not really. I think the Amazon event that you were at, Norm Ferrara was there, the beard guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
He was.
We had Norm on our podcast early on. We've been podcasting since 2017, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Norm was one of our first 10 guests. And it was on SOPs. And he actually had an SOP for hiring VAs that he gave to a VA to hire VAs. He had an SOP for making coffee in the office. Ridiculous little thing, right?
It's very important in Norm's world.
I agree. But it was the most widely listened to downloaded podcast for us at the time. SOPs are critically important because it will make your job easier as you run the business, right? This is something that we're learning at Quiet Light, right? We're now a multi 8-figure business, and we can't be in the grind every day. And we've got SOPs for team members now, and we're pulling ourselves out, myself and Mark, and pulling strings a little bit more. We've got an amazing team, but we're not grinding out every single day because we've got lots of SOPs in place. Took us 4 years since having Norm on the podcast, but we got there eventually. So thank you, Norm. I appreciate that. He's a good guy.
We'll send this to him. So let's round it out. We hit steps 1, 2, and 3. What are 4 and 5?
4, learn about deal structures. So you should know, if you're going into a deal with Thrasher, Elevated, Boosted, Perch, Profound, whoever it is, what kind of deals they're actually going to offer you, right? They say they're going to pay all cash, but they're probably not going to pay all cash. And obviously the probability of that is 90%. So I've got an entire chapter on deal structures so that you can understand what you may be up against and what it means. All right. Something like an equity role. That person that I busted his chops, okay, because he's asking me all these questions. And I'm like, you didn't even read my book, man. Get it out. It's right there. He's doing an equity role, which means that he's selling 51% of the company. He's rolling 49% into the new co. And he's going to have a second exit someday down the road. We talk about details in there. The biggest thing that happens with the aggregators is a stability payment. They look for a stability payment. They say we're going to pay you all cash, right? But that portion of the cash, maybe 20%, is going to go in escrow and sit there for 12 months. You get it released in 12 months if the revenues of the business have been at least 90% of the trailing 12 months prior to buying it. It seems like a very achievable number, right? What if it's at 89.99%? You just lost $200,000. So I talk about different steps in there that you can make sure to protect yourself against them running out of inventory because they hired a low-level inventory manager that didn't pay attention to your brand because they've got 17 to manage. These are real-world problems when companies go from 0 to unicorn inside of 8 months or 12 months or 22 months, whatever it is. That's why I left that first company that I talked about. People were promoted to their level of incompetence, and that incompetence was costing me in terms of my salary and bonuses because they were setting goals that whatever. These people, just because they have a lot of money, doesn't mean they're going to care about your brand as much as you are. And I had a scenario with an aggregator, not any of that I've mentioned so far, where they had this clause and we negotiated a couple of things in there. First, that step clause to make sure it didn't go from, in this case, 300,000 to 0. To also saying, if you run out of inventory, that one of the SKUs represented 70% of the total revenue.
Okay.
Right. And we added a clause in there that said that if you run out of that SKU for any period greater than 1 week in a 3-month period, all bets are off. You owe the entire stability payment and the entire earnout that they negotiated as well. They ran out of inventory 3 weeks prior to hitting that earnout goal. So my client was like 96% of the way there to the revenue amount, and then they ran out of inventory. That would have been a $300,000 loss for my client if there hadn't been that out of inventory, all bets are off clause. So understanding deal terms, understanding what may get thrown at you and negotiating those deal terms is critically important. The fifth step is really creating competition. It goes back to the Shark Tank situation. When we put a listing together, it goes out to our entire database. We don't send it out to 10 aggregators. We send it out to tens of thousands of potential buyers. Just the teaser. They don't get the details unless they've got an NDA in place.
Sure.
And what happens is that if it's an attractive listing, the buyers are going to negotiate against each other, because we may be in a situation, as we are year to date, where we've got multiple offers on every business. We let them know that. We can't tell them what the other offers are, but we go through a process that requires them to give their absolute best and final offer. And we had a situation, I'm going to make this short because I know we're running short on time, with a young lady that bought an Amazon business with an SBA loan prior to the pandemic hitting, turned around, and 18 months later could sell it for a huge gain. One of the aggregators reached out to her, two of them actually, and she was offered $2.2 million for the business. And they were convincing, very, very convincing and knowledgeable and likable, right? One SKU represented a lot of the revenue, concerned about pandemic growth that was going to fall off, and gets the very convincing line, listen, this is what we do every day. We understand this business. This is the best offer you're going to get. Trust me, like me. I'm a likable guy. I'm amazing, right? She said no. She reached out to us. She worked with one of the advisors here. She ended up getting $5.5 million for the business. The first offer that was going to be accepted was 4.5. There were multiple buyers in there, 7, right? But one of the buyers, the 8th one, had a call with her, but hadn't put together an offer yet. Ready to accept that 4.5 million. The next, that number 8 offer came in, $1 million over, $5.5 million.
Goodness gracious.
That paid for the broker fee that the aggregators said that she would have spent, right? Or saved, right? Many times over. It's all about creating competition and making sure that your buyers know that there are lots of other potential buyers. So that person I spoke to that was a podcaster, he had one buyer. It was an aggregator that approached him. So that aggregator didn't come forth with the best offer. And I know that because I've sold them, as the company, quietly, we've sold them many listings before. And their initial, best offer is far from what they're actually going to settle on. So, but they know that he's not presenting his business, his package to anybody else. They also know that his P&L is undervaluing the business because he didn't do a proper add back schedule. But guess what? They're not going to tell him that, because they want that ignorance discount. They want to get as much instant equity when they buy that business as possible. So I think creating competition, reaching out, even if you're selling on your own, you can find an aggregator list online. There's hundreds of them now. Find them all, get their put a package together, find them all. Don't wait for 1 or 2 to reach out to you. Find them all, put a package together, put your list price together, and then reach out to them all, and then have them compete against your business. That's going to drive up the value. That's going to make sure you get the best deal structure, and it's going to make sure you can sleep well after closing with money in the bank and all of those goals that you hit with your financial, feeling, and timing goal as well.
Wow.
Now, why do those multiples go up so quickly? Even I understand, if you're bidding it for a business and you want to win it, you're willing to pay more. But why does it shoot up so drastically from 2 to like 5.5?
In this particular case, when it was 2.2 million to 5.5 million, the newer aggregators have to allocate that money, right? They're actually paying higher multiples than the older, more established aggregators. The ones that are 18 months old. It's the newer aggregators that are fiercely competing to get that first transaction closed, right? And they have lending to allow them to purchase these businesses for, quote unquote, all cash. But they have guidelines from those lenders to only pay a certain multiple for the business. And the way they get away with paying a higher multiple is by not paying all cash. They're going to look for it. It's so convoluted and tricky that we need 6 more hours to talk about it. It's if it feels too good to be true, it probably is. And again, I like these guys. They're smart men and women that have gone to incredible higher learning institutions, Harvard and all those, tier 1 schools, and then went to work at investment banking firms and came out of it with a whole bunch of money to convince you to sell your business to them. It's in their best interest to buy it for as little as possible so they get as much instant equity and as big of a bump when they buy it as possible. The newer ones, to answer your question, Francois, will simply pay more. That's what we're seeing as a trend, because they've got to allocate that money, which means that maybe long-term multiples might come down a little bit, or at least they'll settle, and they won't be, growing like this anymore. They'll just be growing a little bit at a time.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was curious because I wasn't sure if maybe they were structuring it even to their, lenders, saying, hey, instead of like a, 5-year return, we're looking at like a 10, 12, 15-year return on this business. And this is how we're going to grow it. Or maybe they had new strategies to that maybe some of the larger aggregators like Thras and Perch aren't necessarily looking at. But that makes sense. Yeah. Just having to buy it in general.
And if you just think about any of the aggregators, when they buy a business at 4 times, and they're a larger, well-established aggregator, if they buy it at a 4-time multiple, the larger ones like Thras, that's immediately going to be worth 15 or 20 times.
Right.
It's a huge instant equity bump for them. And so, what they're trying to do now is buy simply larger businesses. When they first started out buying from us, they started buying smaller ones, right? 200, 300, 400 million, 2 million. Now they're looking at 15 and $20 million ones, because they can get much more, that bump of, 3 million, the discretionary earnings, what they're buying it for. That just, when it goes at 20 times higher than that, they've just gained, 57 million in equity. It's just, the numbers are huge, convoluted and complicated, all too good to be true. Do your homework, go through all 5 steps. And if you're still going to sell to an aggregator, at least go through the book and read those chapters, because it's written for you. Make it a reference guide for yourself and benefit from it. I think at the very least, it's going to lift the shroud of mystery around, what it takes to sell an online business to a great buyer. At the very least, it's going to do that, clear the smoke away a little bit, and allow you to really focus on your goals and march towards them.
Definitely.
Well, and it's very actionable, which is what I love about it. You have a lot of, you even have, what you were talking about earlier, you were planning to sell it at this time and for these reasons. You write that out with blank spaces. And I think you call out, stop here and actually write that down. It's a very actionable book. I love that.
Yeah, I'm a pain in the ass writer in that way.
but it's awesome. And you guys can find it at EXITpreneur.io. Again, it's the Exitpreneur's Playbook, how to sell your online business for top dollar by reverse engineering your pathway to success. This is the cover you're looking for on the Amazon. And then, Joe, if anybody wanted to learn more information about Quiet Light, or if they were interested in selling or having a discussion, where can they get a hold of you there?
Quietlight.com. Joe at quietlight.com, Joe at EXITpreneur.io. You can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm somewhere on Facebook. You probably message me as well.
Awesome. Well, Joe, thank you so much. This has been a really, really awesome conversation. And again, all of those URLs are going to be listed in the description of the audio and the video version. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, you guys are awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And for anybody who's listening, if you liked what you heard today, the same spiel as every week, y'all. Like, comment, share with your friends, subscribe to the show, turn on those notifications, and that way you'll never miss a conversation with leaders in supply chain and e-commerce like Joe Valley. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, Joe. Bye.